going on with white supremacy on one side and Antifa on the other side, and this whole issue about Confederate monuments that, we have a governor that came out after two communist organizations tore down a monument in Durham, and the governor comes out and says we need to tear down all our monuments across the state. That doesn't sound like excellent leadership to me. That sounds like reactionary leadership. That's kind of dangerous. We didn't talk about any of those kind of issues. They really are real issues. They're tough issues for America. They run a tough time in the country. And so we do need bold leadership to make sure that we are doing the right thing. So I'll stop there. If anybody has questions, we can jump in and we can handle. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming.
What can you tell us about the Board of Elections and ethics issue in the courts, and when are we going to be able to get functioning boards in all counties, not just 90 counties in the state?
I really can't tell you anything. I mean, that's still just continuing to drag out. I don't see like any clear end to it right now. Some decision's going to have to be made at some point, but until then, I think both sides are kind of playing each other against the middle with the way bills are created and passed, and with the way the governor creates certain things that he does are playing into the fact that we don't have a functioning board right now, and that's not good. It's not good leading into redistricting, and it's not good leading into a next election cycle that's coming up. So I hope something gets resolved better.
Would an honest assessment of how the Supreme Court, the 4-3 Democrat North Carolina Supreme Court, how they would tend to go? Can we expect them to be partisan, or are they going to be open to merit?
I think that the North Carolina Supreme Court will be partisan on all tough issues. I think all the big issues like
and that's a tough issue.
It's a tough issue, and I think they're going to be partisan on all those kind of issues. I think that it's just like everything else. 99% of the bills that we pass in North Carolina nobody knows about, they don't hear about. You just go about your day and you don't pay attention. It's that 1% that gets the media headlines. Same for the Supreme Court. They deal with hundreds and hundreds of decisions, and it's 2 or 3 that you'll hear about, and those are going to be partisan decisions. There will be 4 or 3 partisan decisions in favor of the Democrats.
In other words, they overturn what the legislature.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You serve on the State Board of Education, and recently they filed a lawsuit or did a suit against the Superintendent of Public Education. Can you tell us the dynamics of it and what status is today?
So to try to make that not too long, so the General Assembly passed legislation that gave more powers to the Superintendent of Public Instruction. Kind of, I would say, took some of the powers away from the Board of Education, gave them to the Superintendent of Public Instruction, who's a duly elected constitutional officer, as you all know, statewide. Elected the first Republican that we've had elected to that office. The General Assembly gives him some more powers and duties, primarily to hire people, to hire certain people to build his team. The State Board came back, which I'm a member, a voting member of the State Board by Constitution. The State Board came back and said, no, we're going to sue the General Assembly over this issue, and because you're taking our power away from us, and they're a constitutional body as well. And I voted against the suit. So there were 5 of us on the State Board that voted not to sue the General Assembly. I was one of those. I didn't think it was an issue that merited a lawsuit and dragging this thing out for a long time over the fact that we were trying to allow the superintendent just to hire his own people to help run education in North Carolina. The courts came back with a decision that really was in favor of Mark Johnson and against the State Board, and then the State Board decided that they were going to appeal. And so that's where it stands right now. I voted against the appeal as well. So,
isn't that actually a case where, in the past, the constitutionally elected superintendent was essentially stripped of his or her power and made essentially a figurehead? I don't know how that's been over the years, but that's that.
Yeah, this is a little bit different. I mean, this is something that's been around for a while. Some of the powers they're trying to give to the superintendent. So this wasn't a recent history thing that was being changed back, but in my mind, based on the things that were happening, the items that were being directed to the superintendent, the General Assembly had every right to do what they were doing, that they constitutionally had the right to do that. And so, I feel like we need to protect the Constitution the way the Constitution is written. And if you don't like the way that the legislative bodies are allowed to do things within the Constitution, then you need to change that. But we need to uphold the law the way it's written, not just in favor of our certain power structure or our power base, or we think we're losing power, so we're going to sue. And I don't think that, generally speaking, we have a Republican school board at the state level, and Republican legislature, and a Republican superintendent of public instruction. It doesn't do us a whole lot of good to spend 4 years in lawsuits fighting each other. We need to be working together to get things done, is what we need to be doing, and I think that's just a real shame.
Lieutenant Governor, they often say that your character is revealed when no one's looking. And this will probably embarrass you slightly, but the last time you were in the community, you stayed at our inn, and I got up very early to prepare breakfast for all of our guests, including you and your lovely wife. And I found the two of you sitting by our pool in the backyard with your Bible, doing Bible study when nobody was looking. And I am so proud that your faith informs your policy choices, and that you boldly and courageously stand for that as the Constitution allows. And I ask you this question, sir. In the last election, on the ballot was the decision that changed the majority of the North Carolina State Supreme Court from Republican to Democrat. Mike Morgan, the judge who prevailed and changed that, is the judge, in fact, that voted against voter ID. How significant are those decisions on the ballot regarding the courts, as liberals are losing at the ballot box but winning in the courts?
Well, you related to my previous discussion about the Fourth Circuit. They are the most important thing going on in America. Those decisions about judges all over the country. The Democrats did this a long time ago. So we have 32 Republican governors now in America out of 50 states. We have, I'm obviously lieutenant governor. We have 31 lieutenant governors out of 45 are Republican. We have 69 of the 99 legislative bodies in America are Republican. This is something that the Democrat Party knew, and they've known as they continue just to kind of drift more and more left. They've known they really have a hard time winning at the state level, even now at the local legislative level. They decided 20 years ago to start putting their efforts behind the judiciary and behind the judges. And so we saw the Fourth Circuit Court of Richmond, Virginia, who oversees us, we saw that Fourth Circuit Court go from being the most conservative federal district court in America to maybe the most or second most liberal, next to the Ninth Circuit. Can you say that's fair, Judge? Yeah. Ninth Circuit is probably the most liberal. Yeah. But we're real close behind here. And so it means everything. I mean, we have, people in America who are, I want you to take this in the right way, we're ignorant to the Constitution and how it works. So if you talk about the separation of powers, people say, and this is not just ignorance, it's, you go online, you go on the Supreme Court's website. This was true under Obama. I don't know if it's changed. I don't think it's changed now. The Supreme Court's not the president, but I don't think anybody's called on the table. If you go to the Supreme Court, the website will say that there are 3 co-equal branches of government. And our founding fathers never intended for the Supreme Court to be a co-equal branch of government. They have the legislative and the executive branch. And then they had the judiciary, who was not an elected group of people, but an appointed group for life, who they were really pretty much afraid of, because they were like, we do not want these unelected lifetime judges being a co-equal branch of government representing the people. And so forever, for really probably up until the 1940s, you would see Congress and the president calling down the Supreme Court constantly, calling down judges' decisions. You get to the bottom of a decision, and it says, from the court, says, this is an opinion of the court. Excuse me. And that's what they would say. Well, thank you for your opinion, but we don't agree with it. And that was kind of the end of the issue for a long time. And now you have people really thinking there are 3 co-equal branches. So if the Supreme Court makes a decision, they assume it's the law, right? So I'll take Roe versus Wade as a great example, probably the quintessential example in America, Roe v. Wade. People just assume because the Supreme Court made the decision on Roe v. Wade saying abortion is legal, that was the law of the land. That's not the law of the land. That was an opinion of the court. To this day, it's still an opinion of the court. Congress has every right to make a law related to that. They won't, because that's what Congress does. they're not going to touch it, right? They're not going to touch the tough issues. So what Congress has done is they just say, we're just going to abdicate our responsibility to the courts. And so they give this, they don't want to make a tough decision. They say, we'll let the courts, how do you hear that? The court's going to deal with that. The Supreme Court's going to make that decision for us. You should say, all Americans should say, shame on you. You should not be serving in Congress if you're going to allow the Supreme Court to make a decision for you.
Amen.
It's not any different with the only difference is Supreme Court's in the spotlight. In the district courts are not in the spotlight. Fourth Circuit's not in the spotlight. They make decisions in marriage amendment. We passed a constitutional amendment for marriage in North Carolina, overwhelmingly supported by the people of North Carolina. Very difficult thing to do, probably the most difficult legal thing to do in your state is to pass that amendment. And then a three-judge panel, which is the liberal chief judge, the other liberal judge he picks, and then the conservative judge he picks, so that it's a balanced decision. It becomes a 3-2 decision saying, no, now in North Carolina, marriage is whatever you want to make. And that judge made that decision. Judges have no right to make that law. They have the right to make the decision, right? They have the right to rule on whatever that decision is, and then they should send it back to the state legislature or whatever to determine what the law is, or it should go to Congress to make it a law for the United States or whatever it happens to be. But that's why this is so dangerous, is we have the people of America really do believe that the judges have lawmaking authority in our country, which is a scary thing.
I don't know, this is probably to me, because I've been involved in elections things and voting. Are you aware that the state board staff has proposed some changes to the way you challenge voters? That I believe, I'm trying to figure out how they can do it, because the things they're proposing they're directly contradict law.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're aware of it during the last election. They changed their policy. I had a protest in front of the state board. They changed the protest to a challenge and then dismissed it.
Yeah, so we were aware of that before it happened. We wrote a letter to them. We wrote a letter, kind of a long letter that put it out there for the public to see as well, related to this challenging this new decision. I'm going to let Hal talk about it because Hal has been deeply involved with them on their decisions. Hal, do you want to? Hal Weathers, my chief of staff, if you don't know Hal.
Yeah, Dan submitted, an official comment for the record during the public comment period on that, and then we actually attended that all-day kind of staff briefing where they were going through it. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's no seated board technically right now, so you basically have staff not accountable to a board that doesn't exist, making a policy change that will directly impact the 2018 and 2020 elections if you file a protest.
That's right.
When we ran in 2012, this is to show you how we are very much aware of this. In 2012, when Dan ran, we won by 6,800 votes. So we won by 0.25 of 1%. Obviously, no room for error. During that campaign, we actually filed 6 election protests, right? So during the provisional ballot, 10-day canvass, our race was so close to election night, you couldn't call it. You had to go to a canvass in all 100 counties to count all the provisional ballots. There were 50,000 provisional ballots outstanding in the race with only 6,800 votes, right, went between us. And so during that whole provisional balloting process in all 100 counties, in 6 counties, we filed protests. I'll give you one example of that in the interest of time. There was one county, smaller county, Eastern County, where when they came in and did the provisional balloting, counting, right, but you have to notice, you have to publicly notice, on this day, at this gymnasium, at this time, we will count 277 provisional ballots. All that's public record, including how many provisional ballots there will be looked at, right? And so we're lawyered up there. We have an attorney there. And in comes the 277 ballots. They make a decision whether they're ballots or not. Then in comes a guy with a big bucket, puts it down, and says, oh, these are curbside ballots that we forgot to count on election night. Right? And so we're going to treat them as provisional ballots. Of course, our attorney stands up and says that's illegal. There's no chain of custody of those. In fact, he said, where have they been? And he said, in so-and-so's trunk. Right? For 10 days, right? And when they count, so we filed a protest. He physically files a protest on those ballots that are being counted now. And then over and above that, those ballots broke about, I think, 85% for our opponent.
Imagine that.
Anything that's admissible, 54, 55% during provisional balloting one way or the other, if it goes higher than that, is also an election challenge. Because it's a red, it would hold up in court that that's probably fraudulent. Because historically, provisionals were 55% Democrat. So if you have 85%, right? And so we filed 2 challenges right there in one county. And then at the end of the provisional ballots, though, Dan wins. So what do we do to those challenges? We lift them. We don't prosecute. You don't litigate an election you just won. This is why when the liberal media is out there saying, there's never any instances of fraud. We had 6 that probably accounted for about 25,000 ballots. But we won, therefore we lifted the challenges and said, we'll just accept it because we won. You see what I'm saying?
But when you're in a statewide election, those numbers all can continue to add up.
Right.
So if you got to the end of the state election and you lost, those are still important.
Right.
But if you win by 6,000 votes, you got, there are 30,000 that are left on
Right.
the table that we really did challenge that were probably
Yeah.
fraudulent. And
We would not be able to do that under the rules they're making right now. All 6 challenges that we had on the table, we would have had, when the guy came in with the 400 extra ballots, we would have had to have accepted that with no ability to challenge it.
Well, sir, when you become the next governor, the last point I want to make with you, would you please quit appointing a bunch of lawyers on the state board and start actually appointing some people that understand the process?
Wait a minute.
And being in the middle of these protests and these voter issues, somebody like Betsy Means that's been in the middle of it, that understands the law, instead of a bunch of guys sitting up there that agree with each other because they're all in the same boys club.
You can be in the board.
present company excluded. Yes, ma'am.
Listen, Larry.
I've got a question about transportation dollars. The northeast region of this way, very interested in getting the I-87 project completed. What's happening with the limited amount of dollars the state has seems to be all flowing to urban areas. It's not just affecting the eastern part of the state, but the western part of the state as well. The JLOTC came up with some recommendations for the legislature a few months ago about how we can find some more money to put into our transportation funds. How, is that something the legislature is going to take up, or what's the?
I mean, the term in government, finding more money is always a scary term. So usually they find it in my pocket. That's where they find it. So I don't want them to find any more money in my pocket. My take on this, on these kind of things, is there is plenty of money in the state government. If you look at how much state government has grown, percentage-wise, based on population growth even, and based on inflation over the last 30 years, it's exponential. You know, if we would have held constant to population plus inflation growth from 1980 till today, our state budget would be about somewhere in the $10 zillion range instead of the $25 billion. So I'd say there's plenty of money. It's just how we're spending it, and that's always a challenge every budget year. But getting on specifically on the transportation, you made one other comment that is true, but it also should have an asterisk by it. The money is flowing to the urban areas. The money based on the transportation formula is flowing to where the congestion and traffic is. So it's not necessarily based on location, that it's urban or rural, but where are the traffic jams, where are the biggest holdups, and then we prioritize everything based on that formula for that. So the road you want up here, the connector road up here, is an important project. It's on the list. But I would say that, for instance, I'll use a real life example. The toll road in Charlotte, the Phillips Toll Road project in Charlotte, had the formula been what it is today, when they started that project, most of the money would have flowed towards that project. But that's, I travel the whole state. That's the greatest need, is that 77 corridor where you can sit in traffic every rush hour for an hour and a half. Right? So there are places like that where they're based on congestion and need. One of the things that the General Assembly did this past, not this past session 4, when we were doing the bond package, you all remember the bond The bond originally had a transportation component in it, and they were going to do $1 billion transportation bond. And transportation bonds usually fairly popular. People go, yeah, we need better roads or whatever. And obviously we have gas tax challenges too, right, with road funding. But what the legislature did, they said, okay, finally we're going to put a lock on the highway fund and highway trust fund in North Carolina, not rob that, as our previous folks had done for years with the general fund budget. They take money out of that to balance the general fund budget to a balanced budget amendment. And they said, we're going to stop doing that, which that in turn put about $500 million a year into road construction. So they were going to do a $1 billion bond one time, or they could say we're putting $500 million a year back into road construction. So in 2 years, you've met that obligation for that $1 billion, when you're adding $1 billion in on top of that every 2 years. And so that's better than the bond was. That being said, we have lots of road issues. I mean, we're one of the fastest growing states in the country, and I've lived here pretty much my whole life. And in the last 5 years, I've seen traffic increase in this state like it's exponential everywhere you go. And it's not just here in this corridor, but it's everywhere across the state. And we sit in traffic jams across the state on a regular basis now. Whether you're in western North Carolina up in the mountains, or you're in eastern North Carolina, or anywhere in the I-40 corridor. So it's not, people, you're localized, so you sit in your traffic and you know the importance of connectivity to, especially to urban areas. You want to make sure that you're fully connected to southeastern Virginia for jobs and for those types of things. That's very critical to this part of the state. And the same issue is out west. I mean, you go far west, and folks that live in far western North Carolina will tell you that they're closer to 6 other state capitals than they are Raleigh. Yes, they want to be connected to places like Atlanta. Again, for jobs and commerce and that sort of thing that's important. So the issue's the same everywhere. People freak out about the cost of gas, and it's still really low. I mean, it's been about the same for a lot of years. I'm not in favor of tax increase, don't get me wrong. I think that, first of all, like I said, there's plenty of money in state government. But when you're getting less revenues from that, from gas tax in the state, which is the primary funder of your roads, your infrastructure, at some point you're going to have to reinvent some more things. Because the need is not going to go away. It's just going to get stronger.
I want to reinforce what she says. You asked us initially what's important for this area. I lived here all my life. If you upgrade 17 to I-87, I'd like to make sure that people in Raleigh, many of them not familiar with this area, understand just how important upgrading 17 to I-87 is. It benefits multi-counties. It's a gateway to the alcohol. It would turn this area from a Tier 1 area to maybe a Tier 2 or Tier 3, because we've just gotten the right as far as the fair trade zone extended down to the other side of Elizabeth City. And what I'm trying to say is that the economic development, that's one of the key issues where you put a road. That's one of the first issues they look at. What impact economic development would have on an area. That's like opening the door. It would transform this area. But I'm not sure. I know Governor McCory understood that because they're talking about it. But I want our people in Raleigh to understand really how important it is to northeastern North Carolina. It would transform this area from one that you have to put funds in to maybe we would be more income producing and send it. It's very important. The second thing I'd like to make sure you're aware of is opioid addiction in this area is extremely high. We need more mental facilities here through treating and what have you, other than less.
First of all, you can't blame it on Raleigh, right?
No, I'm not
You can't say,
blaming Raleigh.
hold on, let me answer your question, because you asked it, let me answer it. You can't blame it on Raleigh, you can't blame it on Washington, D.C. You just can't. You can't look to the government and say, come fix this problem for us now, because this is an epidemic all over America. Hold on, let me finish.
Okay.
This is, everybody has this. It doesn't matter if you're in Center City, Raleigh, or Charlotte, or if you're in rural America, anywhere in America. This is a massive issue. So you have the Republican General Assembly, and you have the Democrat governor, and the Democrat Attorney General, and you have Congress. Everybody agrees with you on this. There's nobody that doesn't agree on this. A quick fix to this massive epidemic is not going to happen. There's not going to be, you're not going to see drug treatment facilities pop up overnight. But there are tens of millions of dollars pouring into this. And I think everybody's got the same question, how do you fix it? You know, what you have is the sheriffs can tell you here. You know, you have sheriffs keeping people in their jails that need to be in mental health facilities. They've been doing this for a long time, you know, and they don't get money for doing this either. So you see the mental health facilities go away because we said, you know, 20, 30 years ago, this is not a safe way to house patients. We don't think that these people are really being treated, and this is inhumane, the work that's going on in these mental health facilities. And so we tear them all down, shut them down, and then say, oh, well, we really don't know what the solution is. Let the sheriff take care of the problem. So we start sending them to jails, and the jails fill up with mental health patients or people that are opioid addicted. And so we've been doing that for decades now, and now it's hit this crescendo in America. Again, this is not, and I know you see it here, but it's everywhere in America right now. This is probably, you know, the #1 issue we should be focusing on. But now we're spending our time focusing on tearing down monuments and things across our country. You know, and that's what we spend our time on, so we get distracted from the real issue. But go ahead.
I just want to focus on the issue. I'm not blaming anybody.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that in a small rural community like this, we need all the help we can get, whether it be Raleigh, and we need that support. That's what we're asking.
No, and I agree. I don't disagree with you at all. But when people say to me, the money is just not coming. Yeah, that's true for all over America. You know what I'm saying? Everybody has that issue. That's what I want people to understand. Everybody has that issue. And where's it going to come from? This truly is an epidemic now. And I think it took a lot of people by surprise. But it's a sad, sad day. This is the thing that hits. It doesn't matter what station or life you're from. You could be poor, rural, wealthy, urban. And this is hitting people all the same. It's a big deal. So people really are working on it. I want you to know that, and I don't think there is a good solution immediately for it. All the way back.
I want to get back to the transportation issue that Joe pointed to. When you say that you're going to address the congestion areas, that's your #1. But I challenge you to show me historically where you have ever outpaved congestion. You can't do it. The more roads you build, the more congestion you get. So, given that, I'm interested in the economic effects of transportation for an area that's not congested because they don't have enough jobs in transportation to get the businesses here. So if you want to spread the congestion, build us a good highway system here, and we'll help ease some of the congestion in other places.
It's a good theory. It's a good theory, but that's just it. It's just a theory. It's if you build it, they will come kind of theory. And that's fine, but the reality is there are needs out there. I'm not like saying, hey, go pave all the roads in Charlotte. I mean, that's not what I'm saying at all. The transportation formula that was derived by our previous governor, along with the General Assembly, along with the Department of Transportation, said we have a lot of needs in this state right now, and we have to deal with these issues. If you're sitting in traffic for 2 hours in rush hour in some certain city, the people there are going to be clamoring for the same thing you're clamoring for, right? I mean, you end up having a million people in northern Mecklenburg County that are saying, give us roads, give us roads, give us roads, right? And so you have a million people clamoring over there, and you come up to northeastern North Carolina and you have a couple 100,000 people up here clamoring. Who do you think which squeaky wheel is going to get the grease? It's a legislative process, right? It's a representative republic. It's based on numbers. That's the way it works at Raleigh. It's just that's the way it works. And so the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. As an architect, that's my background as architecture. I get it. Connectivity to urban areas for rural America is the only thing that saves it. It is the only thing that saves it. You better be within a 45-minute driving radius to an urban core somewhere as a rural town, you're not going to survive in America. Or you may have something else going on. You may have maybe a tourist town or something like that, but it's going to be very rare that kind of community is really going to survive long term if they're not connected. So I agree with you. I don't disagree. It's not like you don't have an either or. You don't have an either or thing here. You're going, oh, well, we're either going to pave our way out of congestion or we're going to build this thing over here. You've got to do both. You have to do all those things. That's the challenge with government. That's the challenge with leaders. A limited amount of money. Everybody clamors about Taxes, everybody clamors about how much money the government spends on all kinds of things. You have a limited amount, and then you have to determine how you use it. And infrastructure is a primary function of government. I can tell you that I would bet that 90% of the things that we do in government, we shouldn't be doing.
That's right.
I mean, that's about the truth. And so there's plenty of money. At what level do we hold our elected officials accountable to use that money in the way that it should be used? So, you're going to take it from one place and give it to another, and then that whole group's going to be clamoring, and something will happen with it. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Tammy Lee. I'm from Bertie County. I'm county commissioner there. And I would just like to say thank you to you and the legislators for the money that was allocated for recovering from the floods. Bertie was hit mighty hard, and so I thank you from Bertie County.
Well, thank you. I hope, it's never enough, right? And that process goes on for a long time, for years, to rebuild. I think the blessing was that we put money aside in the rainy day fund.
Yes.
We have $2 billion that was set aside in the rainy day fund, and we had a couple rainy days in a row, and we had the money to use for that. And
We're
so
grateful.
We have asked, thank you for saying so, we have asked all of our local communities, our cities and our counties to stash away, like 8% of their money for the rainy day fund, and the state never did that. They never had the same provision for themselves, and now the state of North Carolina has done that as well, so hopefully that'll help all of you on a rainy day. Yes, sir.
I just want to make a kind of statement on the sales tax. It probably doesn't affect any people in here like it would our business.
What's your business?
Small building supply. And a large number of our customers are either one or two people. And now, when they have passed the sales tax on labor, which has been kind of confusion for everybody, that they will spend 10 to 15% of their time now trying to make sure they got the record straight in order to pay the sales tax. It's so confusing to small businesses that I don't think the General Assembly knew exactly what they were doing when they were doing it. If you got a contract or if you got a building permit, there's no sales tax. But if Aunt Mary wants you to go change her door, then you got to give her a new door, pay sales tax on the door, pay sales tax on your labor. Now, this fellow is working out of the back of his pickup truck, and we probably have 70 or 80 of them just in Bastrop County that are doing that. And this effect to them has become very, very negative. It kind of reminds me of what happened in 1992 when the General Assembly was first won by the Republicans, and they only kept it for one election. It took them about 6 years to win that. But one of the first things that they wanted to do was regulate the hog industry. I went to the leadership that I knew in the Republican Party and said, don't do that. Let the Democrats do it.
Well, I think, okay, let's not mix our conversations here, because we're talking about regulating the hog industry. We're not. So, that's the Democrats. They're doing that. We're not doing that. But on the sales tax issue, that was a big issue. So when
and let me finish. You're talking about it helps the corporation. It does not help a S corporation.
Yeah.
It helps a C corporation.
Yeah, that's right.
When an S corporation carries a truck to be repaired, there's a $2,500 bill, and the labor is usually $400 or $500. The other $1,500 is labor. So everything they pay has increased a large percentage on their operation.
Well, let me say this. Everybody will have different opinions based on the tax reform, right? I mean, there were 36 states that attempted tax reform. Every other state in America is still attempting tax reform since we did it. We did it 5 years ago, right? And we're the only state that was successful to do tax reform. I mean, our tax code was 60 years old. And it's conversations like these that make it so difficult, right? Because there's all kinds of unintended consequences. The biggest one was when about, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago, now I can't keep up, I guess it was 3 years ago, when we started making the shift from income tax to service-based taxes. That was the biggest challenge. And I think you're right. I think, generally speaking, that the legislature in general had no idea how confusing it was going to be to those people who were doing the paperwork trying to figure it out. And we were fielding calls, it's not an exaggeration to say multiples a week, from people who were saying, this is the most confusing thing I've ever seen. We don't know what to do. The department itself doesn't know what to do. And so we're the revenue department, and so that battle was going on for years. They fixed a lot of it. They haven't fixed all of it, but they did fix a lot of it. That's the good thing about the legislatures. They go back and they continue to fix these things. But when you're transforming your taxation from an income-based taxation model to a consumption-based taxation model, you're going to have these unintended consequences. The challenge with the income-based taxation is that you're punishing people for their wealth, for creating wealth. You're punishing people for making money. You don't want to punish folks for making money. You can decide if you want to tax people to make money, whatever amount you want to. Why would you punish your top income producers who are creating their businesses and creating jobs? Why not create a flat tax system, a fair system? And that's what we have in North Carolina. We have a flat tax in North Carolina. A lot of people don't know that. But we have a flat tax, and that's a much more fair way to do this. You choose how you spend your money. When you spend your money, you know how you're going to be taxed on spending it, rather than just creating more wealth. So that's a philosophical question related to how you tax people. The government's going to get their money, you know that. They get it one way or another way. We can say we're cutting income tax over here, but we're increasing service tax, one of the best tax structures in America. Tax Foundation ranks us consistently in the top 5. You know, we're doing better than the rest of the country on this. So at some point it becomes philosophical about how you get it, but I don't disagree with you. Listen, there's always unintended consequences. If you have a part-time legislative body out there that's making big, broad decisions for thousands of different industries and trying to assume what's going to happen when they make these decisions. Sorry, I kind of had my back.
you start for being so
Well,
patient.
I don't even know where to start, and this may open more time.
He's got about 4 minutes left.
Yeah, okay, well, going back to the opioid thing, you mentioned that it's not Washington DC's fault or Raleigh's fault, but I would take exception a little bit to that, because the sense of malaise that this last administration in Washington, D.C. has perpetrated upon this country, I think has caused people to seek pain relief.
Maybe so.
Okay. But I used to work in this industry, and briefly, but enough to know that the addiction recovery programs that actually work are faith-based. Are faith-based. And when we have, you talked about the people in the country being ignorant. If you said, I would say, if you took a poll, I would say probably 90% of Americans think the separation of church and state is a constitutional principle. It's nowhere in any one of our founding documents. And if we don't start getting real about addiction recovery, there's no amount of money that you can throw at this problem in this country that's going to solve it outside of a faith-based approach. We're even...
Well, in general terms, I mean, first of all, I agree with you. I mean, being a follower of Jesus Christ, I believe that. I believe that's true for...
Well, it doesn't have to be Jesus Christ. It can, I mean...
Well, being a follower of Jesus, I believe that's true.
Yeah,
So,
okay, fine.
I would say that related to that, that's true for all of social issues.
Amen.
They're about changing people's hearts,
Amen.
right? You're going to change people's hearts, you're going to affect their lives, right? So I don't disagree with that whatsoever. What you have across America is organizations who fight that tooth and nail. If you want to get a faith-based program in a prison, you know what you have to jump through to get faith-based programs in prisons?
I do.
It's unbelievable what you have to do. So that is a sign of where we are in a postmodern, post-Christian, so to speak, nation right now. And so it's going to take far more than legislative ideas to solve these problems. It's going to take the body of, okay, I'll use your broader term, faith-based organizations to really step up and do their job as well. So I believe the churches have abdicated their responsibility to the government as well. So you look
What I'm hoping to inspire in you is to start talking just exactly as you're talking right now. And I want to thank you, Dan. I've not heard you speak before, and you have a gift for making things, for clarity. for clarifying things. And if you continue to educate North Carolinians, there's no, I remember when you walked into the state convention, not this last year, but the year before, and there was a standing ovation for this man. I've never seen that happen in a convention. And I just want to thank you and encourage you to keep educating.
Thank you and your husband for your years of service.
Thank you for attending Lieutenant Governor Forrest, and we're going to ask Myron Simmons to bless us as we leave.
Right.
Let us pray. We thank you for the food we've taken up. We really thank you for the conversation we've had with Lieutenant Governor Forrest. We ask that you will bless his paths and our paths as we go into this day. Help us to be salt to this world and make it a better place. Amen.
Amen. Thank y'all very much.